again. Every time, that stupid button, I hate it so much. I was talking to Owen just before I went live about how much my computer is doing me in, and I knew it was going to mess up the intro, and it has. But hello, welcome. I hope you're well and good this morning. I can't even talk now. This is a great start to a brand new season. As I can't get my words out, I can see Drew rolling his eyes in backstage. Hello and welcome to TGT, back again with you guys for another show, for another episode of our TGT podcast. Our first of the season, as I say, and we start as we mean to go on to give you guys content throughout the season, discussing, of course, initially all of Arsenal's transfer chaos before, of course, going into the season itself, where we hope we're going to be vying for some stuff, some shiny things by the end of the campaign. Anyway, let's introduce you to my panel today. First of all, is the man who just loves to roll his eyes whenever I open my mouth, basically. It's Drew. How you doing, mate? Are you well? Are you good?
Yeah, I'm good. It's good to be back. For starters, I thought when we came on the show, I thought I was on another podcast that looks eerily similar. So I thought I was very confused for a moment, per our previous discussion, but I'm good. And yes, I'm rolling my eyes at you because if you need to get the bloopers out now, get them out now, not halfway through the season. So,
yeah. I mean, it's a case of mistakes early. I mean, Arsenal can't really afford to do that unless they're already doing them, which is kind of the whole point of this show, was to look at our Arsenal making mistakes at the start of this window, which there's been a lot of discussion on the tweets that have gone out. I know that you put one out. A few people have been bringing up some points that we're going to talk about in just a bit. And it's going to be interesting to see some of the points we discuss for sure. Secondly, it's John. How you doing, mate? Are you well? Are you good, friend?
Yeah, good. New season, new technical difficulties, it seems. But
yes, this isn't going to go away.
I feel like it's okay, and it is kind of par for the course with respect to Arsenal. So it's a very appropriate start to a new season of the Gooner Talk. So it's good to be back. Thanks for having me on again.
No problem at all, friend. No problem at all. And finally, it's Owen Flo Young. How you doing, mate? Are you well?
I am. I was just joking. It's actually William Thomas is my middle name, so that's a bit awkward that you're introducing me wrong. And John stole my joke about the start of the show being quite similar to the start of Arsenal's transfer window. So I have nothing else to say, but hello.
Okay, well, that's Owen. We'll see you next week, and I'll continue the show with John and Drew. No, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on again, Owen. It's been too long, son, and I look forward to you getting your "It's Coming Home" tattoo. For those that don't know, obviously there's only a couple more people watch this show compared to the Gooners podcast, of course, so you may not be aware of the fact that Owen has signed up that if and only if, of course, we know, and Drew knows especially, that it is indeed coming home. And when it does, Owen will have to get, as a proud Irishman, "It's Coming Home" tattooed right across, I believe is it your forehead? Is that the right area?
No. There's some ongoing discussions as to the location. A tramp stamp has been mentioned.
Wow.
But I'm not in favour of that, to be honest with you, but we'll leave that for off-the-air discussions.
So the missus says it's coming home every time. Yeah, okay. We can see where it's going to go. Anyway, moving swiftly on to start with, of course, all of our content this evening, which does focus around the transfer window. Now, you may associate TGT with being, we like to feel, one of the more level-headed, positive side of things. But the thumbnail and the title for today's show kind of focusing around on not necessarily the negative side, but more so on kind of trying to understand whether or not things are or aren't going particularly well at this point in time. It is only the 5th of July. The continental window's only been open 5 days. But Arsenal are still, of course, to make any official signings. It does look like they're going to be making some signings very soon. And so far, only one player is left from the kind of the main senior squad, that being Konstantinos Mavropanos. We expect another one to be announced very, very soon regarding Guendouzi, which we'll surely talk about soon as well. But, Drew, it's quite quiet. Are you surprised, done in about this? Are you annoyed that nothing much has happened, or are you kind of accepting of this period of time?
No, I mean, I don't know why people are shocked. It's an international tournament summer. Players don't want to be bothered at the moment. They're focused on whatever's going on with the tournament. It's easier to speak to them when they're out of their camp. So, the hope was to get some business done right before it. We didn't. It's okay. We're still making progress on players that aren't really involved, or that were involved and now they're not anymore. So I'm not fussed with it. I just kind of feel like, I don't know. I mean, again, I get the angst. It's, as much as I take the piss out of it on Twitter a lot of the time, I understand why fans can get frustrated, because it seems like, the longer you wait, the players that you're in for potentially are in for, their heads might be turned from another club that might get interest. So I understand why fans want business done and they want it done now. They want to just get the ball rolling. I get it, but there's still plenty of time left before the season starts. You've got a month and a half, 2 months before you're really worried about it. So no, I'm not too fussed. I'm trying not to be invested to the point of depression this season. You know what I mean? Like, I just want to take it one step at a time. Wait until the end of the summer, see where our business lays at the end of it, and see how the club intend to go forward. And then based off that, maybe you can look at that and then see where we're going to end up at the end of the season. So I'm just trying to take it one step at a time. And when transfers start rolling in and out, we'll see. So we'll just take it from there.
Yeah, it is a little bit, I think, for me anyway, seeing some deals of other clubs get done. I mean, Konate, of course, going to Liverpool, seeing Leicester do some really good business earlier on with Patson Daka. I mean, that for me, and you know me, with my Red Bull Salzburg, seeing obviously them go out and sign that. See Brighton today get linked with Enoch and Wepu as well. It's painful. It's never seeing Arsenal go for one of those fantastic talents. John, how have you enjoyed seeing our world-class midfielder that's about to leave perform out of his skin at the Euros this summer?
Well, you know, I have a kind of documented history on liking Granit Xhaka to many people's, and like I've gotten a lot of stick for my support of Granit Xhaka, knowing that he's, you know, not the greatest player in the world. There is the limitations.
Oh no, but he is. Have you not seen the Euros? Like he is like, the greatest player ever.
I get. Look, he put in an amazing performance, but like I'm not unrealistic about what kind of limitations he has, but I'm also not blind to the positive qualities that he has. So when I'm looking at the summer and I'm looking at what we need to do, assuming that he is going to leave, and it looks more likely that he is likely going to Italy, Roma, or you know, some other, clearly somewhere in Italy. I think that it definitely raises a lot of questions as to how Arteta is going to want to proceed from a tactical standpoint going forward, and then what kind of players, and I believe that there needs to be multiple players that need to be signed to fill in that slot, because and I'm guessing we can get into that a little bit more. I don't know how in depth you want me to get into why I think that at this point in the podcast about what I think we need to do now that Xhaka is leaving. So
yeah, I was just introing you, bro.
Oh, okay, good. Because I'm like, here's this controversial question that we can get it started off right off the bat. But look, man, the guy, you gotta love it. You gotta love when a player who is so divisive just puts in a performance that you can't really question on a stage that big. I love it when it happens. I love it. That's why I love football. One of the reasons, many reasons why I love football are narratives like that. So look, man, good for him. Hopefully he added some value to his sale price there, because, you know, those pictures of him in the huddle were just great. And I'll stop kind of waxing poetical about Xhaka before you lose half your listeners.
Sam Trester in the chat, thank you so much for the super chat. It says Drew. I mean, I can't believe you put it in that order, to be honest. But Drew, Tom, John, and Owen, thank you so much for tuning in on the same show. How could we not smash a like? Thank you, Sam. Much appreciated. I assume someone on that list is your favourite, clearly. Anyway, Owen, I mean, I've asked John there, who's only introing him in, but he wanted to get deep. So are you Arteta in or Arteta? No, I'm only kidding. When it comes down to...
Where do you stand on the ownership?
Yeah. I mean, you've been Kroenke for a long time, Owen. Can you explain your when you look at kind of some of the performances that we are seeing at the Euros and seeing some of the links? Now, I'm playing on the fact that obviously your namesake in front of you there, the ITK. Has that been your favourite part of the window so far? Like looking at some of the crazy links to players that are having a decent Euros but have been pretty rubbish everywhere else in their domestic sense. And have you also enjoyed the fact of just seeing the utter chaos that you see drib-drab through the socials?
Yeah, well, it's actually funny because it's kind of ironic that name, the ITK, is ITK, because I'm actually, as a lot of people know, off Twitter at the minute. So in comparison to maybe last season, the nonsense that I'm being drip-fed is very, very slim. My actual, and look, don't take this as too much flattery, Tom McKay, but it's just convenient for me. But my actual...
Let me get my jacket on first to appreciate it.
My sole transfer information comes from your daily 8 o'clock shows. Make sure you tune in. That's a plug. That'll be a favour. and
get
the
the
stuff
super chat.
and the stuff that's put into the WhatsApp group. So in terms of nonsensical links and stuff like that, I'm actually quite sheltered from all that at the minute. But it's actually it's quite positive. I'm slightly conflicted because I'm annoyed at such a pivotal time in Arsenal's history that how big this transfer window is and how much even Edu and Arteta have emphasised that as well themselves. They've come out quite publicly and stated how they've got a plan in place, and to see nothing really being done yet. I know we said that signings are getting closer, but really they're backup signings. But one thing I am very positive with is there's a clear demographic as to who we are trying to target. You know, we're not going, and we've now seen the backup left back isn't going to be someone like a Ryan Bertrand, as much as I think that he's a very good footballer and could have done a job for us. They seem to be finally learning from the previous mistakes that have got us into this trouble. They're going for more up-and-coming players on the cheap with sell-on value and high ceilings and potential, depending on which one you're talking about, really. But no, in terms of what I'm saying as well, from people from the Euros, the links to Locatelli, as much as I don't think that deal is really viable or that we have much of a chance of getting it done, it's good to see that the club are exploring those avenues and the possibilities of those. James Maddison would fall into that there as well. So yeah, no, I think, look, as much as it's frustrating, there's good signs to come. The one thing I will say is that I have often said as well with Mikel Arteta and Edu that I often think that sometimes they're very, very lucky of having a safety net of an excuse at the time, whether it's COVID or player injuries or having to play, for example, Emile Smith-Rowe, and that was due to injuries and people being unavailable for selection. And now I think with the European Championships as well, that's another excuse as to why business hasn't been done. But there's a few players that aren't at the European Championships that could be brought in at this stage. So I don't know, conflicted is what I would say I am at this moment in time.
It's going to be an interesting one to see how the different stories we see come out when the Euros actually finishes. But we're not going to talk about that because we're not really looking ahead too much. We're kind of looking at what's happened currently. And of course, we will get into kind of some of the stuff that needs to happen. But there is only, for me, one real kind of place to start. Talk about a player that I think, Drew, everybody just agrees on, really, and that's William Saliba. There is, for me, no greater kind of discussion topic right now about kind of a split in the fan base. So we love to talk about splits in the fan base with the managers, with the ownership, well, much less so with the ownership these days. But in regards to William Saliba, it's just a topic which has really angered and almost, I feel like there's almost a little bit of a cult kind of feeling around the player at this point, in the sense that we haven't seen this guy play. This will be his third season, it seems, going out on loan. And every single part about this deal, about this situation, about this player, there is nothing good that the club is coming out for. I've tried to really kind of step myself back from this situation a bit, try and look at it without the frustration, without the anger of wanting to see him play, and think, you know what, he's not played for the last 3 seasons. I mean, we did a show, he's played 16 appearances in his last season as a Saint Etienne player. He played 12 appearances in his first season on loan back at Saint Etienne. He played 16 appearances, I think, in that season, and then 20 appearances, in the Nice loan. So he's barely got a season in, and now he's not going to get a season in this season because we're looking like we're going to sign a £50 million centre-back. And so I was trying to piece together something to make me feel like, yeah, going on loan makes sense. Now, am I mad and just trying to make sense of a bad situation, or is there any truth to that? And how do you ultimately feel about the whole Saliba sitch?
I don't know. There's too many kind of subplots with this one to really kind of narrow on just one. You and I talked about this as well the other day, didn't we? And for me, there's a few things. So one, I'm not upset that he chose to go back, that he chose to go to Marseille. I think when you look at it, Marseille have Europe next season. They're a big club in France. There's going to be expectations around how he performs at a big club. Marseille are arguably the second biggest club in France, really. They're huge. So, and they have Europe. So for me, from that standpoint, he still has to deal with expectations about how he performs. He's going to get minutes in Europe, which he's not going to get at Arsenal or any club that was in for him on loan. So automatically that's good for his development as well. And then despite that, I think the one aspect that people really aren't considering, or if they think about it, they make light of it, is he's still not that far removed from what happened with his personal life, with his family. And because he chose to go back to France tells you that maybe he's not completely 100% ready yet to remove himself from that environment fully yet. Maybe he needs another year. We don't know that. I'm fine with the fact that he was able to choose his destination. I think that goes back to what you and I talked about. You were saying how you think clubs should guide a player towards their own destination. I don't necessarily disagree with that. But if you look at, for example, look at the fact that Newcastle were interested. I don't want William Saliba on loan at Newcastle, not because they're a poor club, but it's because he's not going to play the type of football we are going to use him for when we have him. So he needs to be in an environment where he's playing the brand of football that we're going to want to institute him into when he comes to Arsenal. And Marseille are going to be way closer to that under Sampaoli than he's going to be getting at Newcastle, whoever their manager is going to be next season. So for me, I'm fine with that as well. I understand the fact that people wanting to get Premier League minutes and adapt to the culture and adapt to England. I take all that on board. But I think my take on it is we don't know all the options, but of the options that were available that we know of, Marseille is the best choice given a varying degrees of factors. So I'm fine with it. As for the fan reaction, I think it's weird that there's such a cult following around him, despite him never playing a minute for the club yet, really. I think fans get too attached too quickly on what a player's potential is, and you're already seeing it with the Lokonga signing. No one in his fan base had a clue on who this kid was at all until we were linked him. And now all of a sudden,
he doesn't start on day one. There is going to be pandemonium.
And now everybody all of a sudden is an expert on Lokonga. No one knew a thing about him. But the fact that they heard that he's now thought of as highly as Tielemans was when Tielemans was at end, like all of a sudden everyone's Lokonga this, Lokonga that, can't wait to get him in, brilliant move by the club. That's what I mean. People are attaching to what they hear, not what they see. You just don't know. He's not, as much as I'm fine with, given the nature of the season, giving him the opportunity to start on match day one. I don't think he's going to. And especially if we're linked with someone like Locatelli or of that profile that tells you that the club don't think Lokonga is going to be starter this season, that's more of a long-term deal, and we should be fine with that. But it's just like, for me, I just think that the fans have to detach themselves from what they see from a player who is elsewhere and what they expect from them when they come here, especially when they're younger. So it's just, you got to find the balance. But I'm fine with the Saliba deal. Whether we sell him, whether he integrates next season, I don't know. You don't know. So I'm not even going to speculate. It's just a matter of hope he does well in his loan at Marseille. Hopefully he gets the closure that he might potentially need given what he's gone on with his personal life. Hopefully what Ornstein said in his tweet about the club still have a long-term plan for him. Hopefully that's the case. If it is the case, then we move forward from there and we just take it one step at a time. I'm really not, again, I'm not trying to get invested to the level that some of our fans have gotten invested to when it's nothing to invest in yet. So I think for me, that's the key. And that's kind of where I kind of drop it for myself.
For me, the whole Saliba situation has always been very much attached to Mikel Arteta himself, and always kind of this thing about Arteta hates him is what we hear. Arteta doesn't rate him. Arteta hates this kid. He never wants to use, never wants to play him. But we don't know behind the scenes. Like, ultimately, the fact of the matter is we don't know. We can make a pretty good guess that right now he doesn't rate him, because if he did, he would be playing him. He would be in the squad and he would be getting chances. The personal side of the thing, to make it kind of a social link, to make it kind of personal, you just don't know. So, John, does Arteta hate Saliba?
Look, the biggest thing about the Saliba situation is just the lack of kind of a clear picture as to what's going on. We can kind of extract bits and pieces from what we hear in various tweets from sources that claim to have some kind of an insight into it. And from that, you never get a full picture of it. So when you're sitting back and you're trying to analyze, look, what's going on with this situation, it's very opaque and it's very nebulous, and it's very difficult to kind of pinpoint exactly what to expect from it, because it's kind of, it is kind of brand new territory for us. I can't recall another loan signing that young, that expensive, that has not even kicked a ball for us. Not even in a preseason. I can't. If you could think of one, if someone on this chat can think of one, I can't. So to kind of sit back and say, hey, how are we going to intelligently unpack exactly what's going on with the signing, or what to anticipate for the future of the signing, is extremely difficult for me. All I know is that it's very, very odd. it's very odd that we have this high talent, and we paid this much money for him, and he hasn't even kicked the ball for us. And I think that's the kind of, I don't really know if you want to call it confusion, but it seems like the best way to describe it amongst the fan base is that, there's a confusion based off of his apparent talent and his actual price tag and the fact that he hasn't played for us. So what do we do? What do we extrapolate from that? Like, clearly the easiest answer is that the manager doesn't like him or doesn't rate him for whatever reason. But as Drew pointed out, there are all these corollary reasons alternative reasons besides the fact that the manager doesn't like him as to why maybe he's not ready to play for us yet, in which case that the decision not to play him might be the greatest possible move for not only the club but for the player himself as a human being, not just an athlete who has no feelings and things like that. So I think it's a weird situation. I don't know if there's a clear-cut answer with it, and I think it's hard to say one way or another what the manager feels about him, just because we haven't seen him. But it's bizarre. And I'll tell you what, when I'm thinking about our moves this summer, it's clear when we're looking at Ben White and things like that we're trying to replace players like Luiz, who we want to play this deep lying defensive player who can actually move forward. With Luiz, he was able to play a long ball out to the wings. With this guy, with White, it seems like he's going to be able to carry the ball well. But we don't know what Saliba would really have to offer. Like Drew was kind of pointing out that. We know what he can play when he's on loan in France, but when you put him in this Arsenal side, we don't know what it's like. Now, ostensibly, the manager has seen him in training and things like that. And if it was something that was so vital to the way that we were playing or the way that he was practicing and setting up, surely we would have seen him. So the fact that we haven't says that there's either something wrong with the way that he's playing from a tactical perspective, or there's something personally wrong with him that is just not gelling or something like that. Because like Drew said, if he was playing well, in the sense that he was fitting in and he was mentally mature and ready enough to play in the side, I don't see why he wouldn't, other than the manager just not liking him. And for some reason, I can kind of see that, because Arteta does, I don't want to call him petty, but does seem to have the my way or the highway about him. So maybe that's not really gelling with Saliba, and that might be one of the explanations. But like I said, it's opaque and it's very weird and it's unprecedented in my opinion.
Sam, again, thanks so much for the super chat. He says, we love to jump to conclusions in this fan base without really knowing the facts. The club is a lot to blame by not being open with us on Saliba from the get-go. There is kind of a bit of a media silence around the whole Saliba situation. I hope that when this loan is seemingly announced, that we do hear some words of encouragement, that in fact they do kind of see him very much as someone they see in the future, and fingers crossed we see him play in the future as well. But there is so much kind of just monotonous nothing answers we get when Arteta's kind of questioned on it, and it's just very much like he's under contract, he's our player, etc., and it's just politically kind of responded to, which I think rolls up the situation even more. I mean, Owen, there is obviously he is obviously a very talented young player. He showed that on his loan at Nice last season, did really, really well there. But at the same time, Arsenal are in a situation. I brought this up on a video I posted on Twitter earlier and to Insta as well. What we're doing, like kind of these 1-minute discussion videos about how many kind of 21 and under players do you put in a Premier League side? Because if you look at your Cities, your Chelseas, your Uniteds, your Liverpools, the top teams in the world that are pushing for the position where we want to be, like we want to be where they are. That's our ultimate goal, is to try and get back into that established top 4 position. How many of them are playing with more than one or two 21-year-olds and younger? And Arsenal have already got Saka and Smith Rowe. We're desperate, and the fan base is desperate to see Martinelli get more minutes. We're now desperate to see Saliba play. How do we find this balance? And then the counter argument, to be fair to people that raised it, people say, well, if you're good enough, then you should play, which is a completely fair argument. However, I do kind of associate the fact with 21-year-olds and younger, there is an element that goes beyond just quality, that goes into kind of the psychological aspects, the experience that goes with more years under your belt. And can you really put 4+ 21-year-old and younger players in a team that wants to compete with your Chelseas, your United, your Liverpools, your Cities to get that top 4 spot?
It's incredibly hard to find the right balance with that, I think, especially for a club in decline like Arsenal is. I suppose the obvious one people are going to jump to like in defence of that would be saying Fofana at Leicester, but I don't think they're overly comparable, and it was circumstantial that he got that opportunity. And actually, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that even though he was quite good, I think Leicester conceded more goals with him in the side than without. So, that would maybe go against that argument. But look, I think with those young players, you're at risk of seeing burnout over an extended period of time. I think we saw that towards the end of the season with Bukayo Saka in terms of his numerical output towards the tail end of last season. But look, I think the lads, in terms of William Saliba in particular, the lads covered everything pretty much spot on. The only one thing that I would add to that is, and the one thing I keep coming back to, and it's a very, very, very simple argument and very, very, very simple question to ask yourself, and it's, do I trust Mikel Arteta with the future of William Saliba in the fragile state that it's in? And the answer is no, not at all. We're talking about a kid who's coming in with a massive reputation. Before he was coming in, tipped as being the next Rafa Varane, even though I hate those next things, but coming in with a massive reputation, touted to be the next big thing, that he was a fantastic player. And Mikel Arteta has taken a disliking to him for whatever reason, as you said, Drew, whether that be personal or tactical, we don't know. We can only speculate. But for me, what is clear is that it's fine in saying how many 21-year-olds or 20-year-old centre-backs start for other top teams, but the other top teams aren't in the state that we're in. They're not competing against someone like a Rob Holding or a Pablo Mari or players of that mould. They're much higher quality centre-backs at those clubs. So I think the circumstances are different. But for me, again, it just goes back to that point of, do I trust Mikel Arteta to handle the situation? And for me, it's a no. And I think this could be one of those ones where we look back, like people do it with Serge Gnabry or whoever you want to name, the amount of players that we've let go of and went on to do quite well. But I think this could be one that we look and say that this was handled terribly, and it is, because at the end of the day, he comes back from this loan with 2 years left on his contract, and it's crunch time.
Yeah, I do agree in the sense that the reason why obviously other teams don't play with many 21-year-olds is because they've got those experienced players. They've built that squad really, really well. And ultimately, the reason why there is an argument to say we should play Saka and Smith Rowe, Martinelli and Saliba is because they're better than the options that they're up against. And it is a solid point. And to that, I know that, Drew, you want to kind of come in on a point about Saliba as well, and talk specifically about something that was said in the chat as well.
Yeah, just briefly, someone mentioned Malang Sarr in the chat, and that's the perfect comparison because he came very highly touted from Ligue 1 as well. The first thing Chelsea did when he arrived was ship him right back out on loan because he was not going to play for Chelsea at all his first season. He was going to get minutes in France. It's an almost identical situation. The only difference is Saliba has slightly larger expectations attached to him. But it's the same premise. No one in Chelsea's fan base argued with the fact that Sarr should be going in or out. And they didn't know they were getting Thiago Silva at the time, I'm pretty sure. I think the Silva deal happened after that fact. So, but again, this goes back to Owen's point. Is valid that, when you're looking at what our center-back options are and the fact that we're also letting center-backs go, is that, maybe now is the perfect chance for him to get a chance. But I think if Arteta trusted Saliba, we wouldn't be getting Ben White, and Saliba would be coming in and it would have a role in the first team. I think that's the difference for me. But also long term, getting White doesn't necessarily inhibit Saliba's future at the club either, because we don't know what's going to happen with Rob Holding. We don't know what's going to happen with Pablo Mari. And if it's been kept saying to us by the regime or by watching whatever mouthpiece is that he still has a long term future with the club, then we just have to put faith in that. And I know that's hard to say because there's so many questions and there's not a lot of transparency. We've all talked about that before. But again, and as we've all just stated, there are very few 20-year-old center backs starting in the Premier League. Not just the Premier League, for any club of note. Usually they don't. You don't see it happening at Bayern. You don't see it happening at Real Madrid, Barcelona very rarely. Those level clubs, you don't, in their Juve, 20-year-olds don't start as center backs for those clubs. So and what kind of frustrates me, and I kind of want to get your guys' take on this, is the fact that a lot of our fans really genuinely think, rightly or wrongly, that we should be challenging for top 4 this season genuinely, that there's no excuse now because we don't have Europe, right? So we can solely focus on the league, really make a strong push. Do you really think we can challenge for top 4 with a large portion of our starting 11 being teenagers or just over that age? I don't think we can. And I think that's the balance for me. That's what frustrates me, is that fans are demanding a serious push this season, but they want to do it with a 20-year-old starting center back, with a 22-year-old other starting center back. That's probably not going to be what's happening. So that for me that's what I don't understand. So I want to know what you guys feel about that, because for me it just seems like, and this is kind of something I've banged on before, and I'm not trying to rag on the fan base. Sometimes I do, like with reason, and I don't say I don't, because sometimes I think that there should be criticisms. But for this, I kind of feel like we need to know what our priorities actually are. If we want to persist with someone like Saliba in the team, then we have to consign ourselves to thinking that we can't get top 4 this season, that we have to push for maybe finishing 5th or 6th at best, considering the teams in and around us or above us. Or if we want to challenge for top 4, maybe going after someone like a Ben White or whoever is going to be that much better in the immediate future. That gives us a better chance of pushing on, because obviously the club rate Ben White higher than they do William Saliba. So if that's the case, regardless of the fee, if that's going to give us a better chance of finishing better than we would be without him, then that's kind of would be what my take would be, is what we should be focusing on. But I want to know what you guys think.
Well, I could jump in there real quick. So one thing I just wanted to point out, we mentioned Sarr, but I think some important aspect of that is that Chelsea backline was more or less situated at that point. So it wasn't like our situation where we're having probably our most experienced defender leaving in David Luiz, and now we're having a bunch of younger players, and we don't really. If I said who is our backline next season, I don't think any of you are going to give me an answer that's something reasonable, because we have a lot up in the air with respect to the back line. And when we're considering like the importance of and forget, not even just the back line, the goalkeeper situation now. Now Runnerson's leaving. We have one goalkeeper. So we really got to sort this back line out. Are we trusting a player like Saliba to come in and do that? I don't necessarily think so. And I mentioned the first kind of diatribe I gave when Tom was just trying to intro me was mentioning David Luiz and his tactical ability to kind of play the ball out from the back. And we know that, especially if we're going to have some kind of tinkering to do in the midfield next season, which we are, we're going to have to bypass the midfield sometimes. And we had a lot of opportunities to do that with players like David Luiz and with Granit Xhaka. Both of them leaving now, we're going to either have to play the ball through the midfield with some technical midfielders who can hold the ball, which, does anyone trust Arsenal to make those signings? No. Or a player like Ben White, who's going to come in and be able to carry the ball up to, up into our own half and create the play from there. So I think that when you're looking at what are we going to do? What are we going to do to either ensure, and I'll get to your question in a minute, what our goals are, which I think which I think have to be top 4. You got to look at, what is this backline going to even look like? What are we going to try to do going forward? And I think that is the first question that needs to be answered from a tactical perspective. But actually, I'm gonna go back on that. I think that your question is the one that needs to be answered first. Is that, what is our goal next season? It has to be top 4. We have to get back into Europe. I think either through the Champions League, which would be ideal, that's our main goal, or at least through Europa League again, which is extremely depressing to say, because a couple seasons ago we were like kind of commiserating over the fact that we're going to be playing in Europa League, not in Champions League anymore. Now it's like, please, we need to get back in Europa League at least. So I think our goal is definitely to get in Europe, one of those spaces. In order to do that, and one of the reasons why everyone's so upset about Saliba, I think, is because it's so obvious that back line needs to be fixed and needs to be solidified, because we're losing important players there. We're losing defensive stability, and it's going to be up in the air. And I think it goes to your question, or kind of one of your comments rather, is that, do we have a 20-year-old player come in alongside players like Mari, along players like Holding? Is that the answer? If our goal is to get into a top 4 European spot, I don't think we can. And I think that's the difference between a Sarr and Saliba, because Sarr left, but it was okay because their backline was more or less stable. It wasn't like, what are we doing? We only have one goalkeeper and we have a bunch of 20-year-olds playing in the defense. So that's where we're at now. And he was free. So it wasn't one of their biggest signings for a defender. And he, and I get he's young and all that, and we make stupid moves and his price shouldn't matter. But of course it does, because not only in that player's mind, but everyone else on that team and everyone in the footballing world, for the most part, is going to look at that price tag and make make assessments based off of that. The player is, his teammates are. It's not a non-entity. It's not a non-factor in this discussion, his price. So people could just dismiss the price as, it's who cares? Pepe cost 70 million. The whole narrative, the media, other players, everything about Pepe has been his price tag. How can we say that that's irrelevant? We can't. So all of that comes together. Anyway, I don't know. I kind of answered your question. I think we need to go into, we do need to make top 4 or top wherever. We need to get into Europe, basically. And I think that we need to sort out our back line. And that's probably why one of the big reasons why Saliba went alone. And because our back line is not stable, I think that that's one of the differences between the Sarr situation and Saliba.
Deep breath. Breathe in.
And rant.
I mean, how are you feeling about that? Kind of, I will let you round off this Saliba chat because we have been going for 35 minutes on it. I mean, do you think ultimately there is? You said earlier that you don't trust Arteta with Saliba, which is completely fair enough, and there's all the evidence in the world to back up that point. He goes on loan this season. Say he plays a first full season in 3 years, which is what it would be. It would be a first full season playing at a senior level for 3 years. He gets 38 games under his belt, barring any injuries, of course, and comes back to Arsenal. Is there any future, you think, for this kid?
To be perfectly honest, I think the only future I see for William Saliba at Arsenal is that if Mikel Arteta is unsuccessful this season and has moved on, somebody put into the live chat earlier the fact that William Saliba was sitting at Watford after being signed in with the fans. Make no mistake about it, William Saliba wants to play for Arsenal Football Club. I think that you see from his comments in the media, through his interviews, that he's quite hurt at the fact that he hasn't even been given a chance yet. So for me, this one must sting for William Saliba as well. He seems like another kid coming out of the French camp with maybe a little bit of spice in his attitude as well. That could possibly be part of the reason he's and sort of thought ill of from Mikel Arteta. But yeah, look, he's a fantastic player with a big reputation. He's went to Nice, he's proved it, and I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that he will go to Marseille and he'll shine again. It's just a case of whether the landscape at Arsenal changes. And to be perfectly honest, if we're going off maybe the last 18 months of what we've seen from this team and manager, unless there's drastic changes throughout the transfer window, I think the most likely thing is that William Saliba could return under different management. Yeah,
there's all the possibility in the world that could happen. And I think a lot of people will look at this situation and think of the money that we spent, but I think also they detach from that the fact that he was bought under a completely different regime at the club.
But I think isn't that surely plays into it, because I know myself, I've already going into this transfer window sort of came to the conclusion that I'll wait until all the business is done before I blow a gasket and start going mad. But I do understand the fact that we're told that Arsenal have limited resources, that it's a pandemic, there's been a pandemic and funds have been impacted. And I think that that's the thing, that not what people think of Ben White as a player or anything, but there's the possibility of 50 million going on a centre-back when there's all these other positions to be filled. And people are saying, is it really necessary to offload that much on a position that we supposedly had one of the top European prospects to fill already? And I think that's where it's bothering people.
Yeah, I think that was kind of the next actual topic that I wanted to come on to is the kind of the where we're putting our funds. So thanks, Owen. You've done my job for me. Much appreciated.
I don't read the private chat, bro.
I mean, if you did, you'd find out that John, you're negative Nelly. That's what you are.
Apparently, someone in the chat said I'm one of the negative fans. That's all right.
Oh God, it must be the first time tuning into you, John. It must be it. I don't know what you said that was negative.
I don't think I said anything negative. I thought I was being pretty reasonable about that. I was like trying to give fans who are upset like a basis for being upset, and I wasn't saying I agree with it. I was just saying like this is a possibility. But apparently it's negative.
You can't please everyone. This is part of the game. This is the business we're in, son.
But yeah, so is the argument that like you're not rational for being upset over a situation, you're being negative? Why? Like, do you always have to look at the bright side of things? Or
hey, look, I put up a video today on the one I put up on Twitter, and someone said that like none of the youngsters have improved, like, and we're playing all of these, and I said I don't agree with that. I think Emile Smith-Rowe and I think that Saka have both improved in the last 6 months under the current coach.
Of course.
And I was told that, you're making excuses for Arteta. And it's like you can't voice an opinion without it coming across one way. And I wanted the guy gone at the end of last season. I thought he deserved to be sacked. And yet I'm still apparently making excuses for the coach by saying that I think those two players have improved.
And you
under
could
this
you could be realistic. Like, the positive thing would be if Saliba worked out, he came in this season and we got top 4, but that's not happening. And by acknowledging that, it's not negative. It's just like, look out your window. Realistic. There's a tree, you know, it's not, that's not, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just reality.
Rational. Yeah, it's rational. It's completely rational. Anyway, Drew, is talking about rationality, is it rational that Arsenal spend £50 million on a centre-back after having the second best defence in the league last season?
I mean, yeah, if you think about it, because, I mean, the fan base, oh my God.
Careful, they'll come for you.
Don't be
negative, Drew. Don't be negative.
Just give me a second. So one of the things that requires you to be able to get to the top, so you have to, once you get there, you have to be able to remain there. And part of that is you always have to make yourself better. And unfortunately, the nature of the Premier League is very much like an arms race. Every summer, every top team brings in top talent, try to make sure they can keep pace with the clubs that are around them. Or if you win the league, you want to make sure you can stay to win the league, and you have to do that by signing players. One of the reasons why Liverpool had such a hard fall from grace after they won Champions League and the league is because they didn't sign anybody, and other clubs around them passed them over in terms of depth of quality and maybe starting 11 quality, and that was one of the issues. So yes, I do think, and make no mistake, I think we've come leaps and bounds where we were previously with the defense to where we ended up last season. I think we were brilliant by comparison, but it doesn't mean that the work is done. It means you have to continue to keep yourself at that level. And it's been proven time and again in the Premier League that having a really good defense in terms of both personnel and the way it operates is one of the key things that you need. Oftentimes, if you're not scoring goals, if you're keeping them out, you'll still end up higher in the table by comparison with teams that have scored more goals than you. Leeds scored more goals than we did, but their defense was poor by comparison. Thus, we finished ahead of them in the table. So that's just one kind of microcosm example. So for me, I mean, I don't know where I stand on the price of White. I mean, we can all sit here and say we understand it. He's young. He's an English international. He's homegrown tax. All these things come into play. We've seen it before. We fleeced people for 40 million for both Oxlade-Chamberlain and Alex Iwobi. So why are we shocked that Ben White's going to cost 50 million? We didn't remotely deserve 40 million for Iwobi, as an example. I understand it's depressed market, so the theory that Ben White would cost even more in a non-depressed market is irrelevant to me, though, because if Ben White's going to come in, presumably as a starter, and make us better, then I'm fine with spending £50 million for him. Because, again, if his profile grows with the club, if we improve with him in the back, if we, for some strange reason, ever needed to sell him later on down the road, we're going to make a profit on his sale for the reasons why we're spending $50 million on him now. The same reasons why we can get a large sum for him later if we had to sell him. I'm not saying we're going to buy him to sell him. I'm saying if, worst case scenario, it came to that. My only concern now is, are we going to get better? And I think a lot of the fans have been conned into thinking, well, not conned, I wouldn't say conned. I'd say the line from the club has been that we need to be smart in the market because funds have been tight, which has been true. But if it is true this season that we're prepared to actually spend, then the funds should then become irrelevant. I don't care how much Ben White costs. I care about if Ben White's going to make us better. Does Ben White fit what Mikel Arteta wants? If these things are all true, then go out and spend £50 million on Ben White. That's it. That's where the buck stops for me. I just want us to be better. I know it's not going to be as fashionable as going and getting someone like Tapsoba from Leverkusen or something like that, but I think if he fits the bill, he fits the bill. Then that's it for me. 50 million it is, and 50 million it is. So,
what frustrates me, and I'm having a couple of discussions in the chat box while you were talking there, is that people are so dismissive about Ben White because of the existence of Saliba. That's what really gets me. That's what really bugs me, is that you can't look and you can't go out and actually listen to the people that have genuinely watched Ben White for the last 2 years, see how they assess this guy, and go, okay, he actually sounds pretty darn good. And when you go and watch him and you dedicate some time to actually seeing him play, everything about his game is what I want to see in an Arsenal defender after losing the likes of David Luiz. Go on, John.
And why is the price relevant for Ben White but not Saliba? So the same people, I've seen the same people who are saying, that it doesn't matter how much we paid for Saliba, saying we're paying 50 million for Ben White. What are we doing? We need other players. So clearly, it's relevant because, and here's the thing, it's based off of this assumption that and it's not an unreasonable assumption, that there's a finite amount of money for us to spend in the window, right? And arguably the argument that on the other side is, if we are going to spend 50 million on Ben White, we're not going to get it in areas where they think, and I think Owen kind of alluded to this, we need a little bit more help, like in the midfield, for example. But I don't know if that's even necessarily true. I think that if we're losing players like Xhaka and Luiz, we're going to need, especially knowing that Arteta likes to play ball from the defense to the attack, someone that when there's a midfield that's going to be probably better than ours, that we're going to have a player that can cut through that and take possession from defense to attack efficiently. Ben White can do that by all accounts. Ben White that's what he does. In fact, people are going, maybe this guy should play in the midfield. That's how good he is at that. So like Drew said, if it makes us better, I'm all for it. And I just think it's funny that it's very selective when people use the price tags.
Oh, it's so selective. And I ask every single time someone goes Saliba is way better than Ben White. And I go, tell me why. Tell me categorically, explain to me why Saliba is better than Ben White. What is it about his game? What is it about his tackling? Show me some statistics. Show me some evidence that tells me why you believe Saliba is better than Ben White. And I get nothing. I'm yet to see. And the thing is, and people know from watching the channel, I am always open to having my mind changed. Always. If someone can present me with an argument that will change my mind, I will change my mind. If there is enough evidence out there, unless it's Drew, that's the only other time I refuse.
I was waiting for it.
But I haven't seen anyone yet provide me that evidence. The closest that I've had so far is that when we did the tactical breakdown on Ben White and we had Jeremy Smith come on the show. Now, Jeremy is obviously a Brighton fan, so he's seen plenty of Ben White. He's also actually a massive in the know guy. I hate to use that word, but he is genuinely in the know about French football and knows his French football. He believes that those two are kind of the same development track. He does say in the tactical breakdown, he says, "Do excuse my bias to French football." And that is another thing, is that a lot of the French football experts I know, like Jeremy, like Chris from Burkout Wonderland, go check him out and go check out Chris, by the way, is that there is a very clear bias towards French players and French football. And I sometimes see it with Chris. And I said to Chris the other day that he's obviously quite annoyed right now that Guendouzi and Saliba are going to be going again. And I do feel that, say, if they were Spanish, say if they were Italian, would he have that same connection? And I completely understand that, because I'm the same way was before, I've changed a bit since, but was about that with La Liga. I used to be so precious about La Liga players, La Liga talent, Red Bull Salzburg players, of course, too. And it's almost impossible to remove bias at times. But I just want to see some tangible evidence put towards me that shows me why someone believes Saliba is better or should be playing over Ben White, other than, he's the next Varane, other than, he cost us 30 million quid. Like that, it's not a tangible argument for me.
And just real fast, I also want Owen to come in too, but this is where it frustrates me when people just look at data as end all be all explanation. You can't.
Context.
Exactly, because if you compare, say, Saliba versus Ben White, or I don't know, Saliba and Mavropanos or whoever it is, you can just sometimes the data comes out that some players is beyond clear over the other, immeasurably. And then people look at that and say, well, look at this, he's better. But you have to take in, again, the context of the type of football that's being played at that club, the league that is being played in. These are other things that people don't really factor in. And it's kind of one of the things that I kind of mentioned about Jadon Sancho coming to United. I first of all, as a Dortmund supporter, I absolutely love Sancho. Let's get that clear. I think he's England's best winger. I don't care what anybody says. There comes my German bias, just like you have with Chris's French bias and your La Liga bias. I think Sancho's brilliant. I think he's England's best winger. But you also have to understand that he's going to get less time and space on the ball in the Premier League. He's going to be facing low blocks almost every single week, bar playing against a top 6 side. He doesn't face that in Germany, so he might come into the league and he might struggle at first. And then people are going to say, well, we paid £80 million. We got gypped. He's a flop. And then that's the same arguments that I had to suffer all season long with Kai Havertz. It drove me up the wall.
And Pepe.
Of course. And the thing about
Pepe
the thing with Pepe is that if he'd have come in for £30 million, I could have stomached the 18 goal contributions in his first season, the fact that he struggled and stuff like that. But I'm never going to get over the £72 million. I'm never, ever going to get over that. And that's, to be honest, I don't blame a lot of people for it. I don't think a lot of people are going to get over the fact that we paid 28 million quid for William Saliba and he's not got a single game of football. Let me just read that.
And really
Quickly, John, can I just...
Of course, sure. Yeah.
Can I just read this? Comment and I'll let you go. I'm desperate to read this. Fuaban says, I'm not digging you out, I've just highlighted this comment. Says, let's be objective about this. We cannot objectively compare the two of them as we have not seen Saliba play as the coach didn't give him his promised pre-season. Now, that's fine. However, if that is the arguments being put forward, then how on earth can we ever say that it's worth playing him over someone like Ben White, who has categorically, according to the people that have genuinely watched him, really excited them and really does and look towards him as a real star of the future and the reason why he's been called up for the England national team by, the man who's bringing it home this summer. So it's for me that it's that type of argument that really frustrates me, because if he's not, we haven't seen him. So how on earth, and why would you risk it as well, rather than let's go out and sign a £50 million centre back that's genuinely, how I believe anyway, that good.
I do.
You've knocked John right off there, Owen.
Sorry,
no, go for it. I was letting it.
I was doing it on purpose, but I'll go with it now because he was so polite. No, I do see some sense in people having an issue with the £50 million price tag of Ben White, because, well, it was 40 million originally, and then Brighton.
And like, you feel that we should be going for a midfielder or a right back.
Well, it's not that. It's the deal that's being made. I don't understand the logic with some people when they talk about the outlay of funds. So, for example, what I would say is that 50 million on Ben White, some people say, that's just the going rate for an English centre back. That's the way of it. And then when somebody turns around and says that Arsenal could have the opportunity to sign James Maddison for 60 million, it's a lot of money. I don't think Arsenal have the money to be spent on that. And it's like, where's the logic? How can we outlay 50 million on a centre back that some people, not myself, some people would be considered not a necessity at this stage, whilst we absolutely lack creativity last year. Emile Smith-Rowe is the only natural number 10 that we have in the squad at the minute. And somebody of the quality of James Maddison is available between 60 to 70 million, and that's too big of a deal to get done. Some of the arguments lack logic, I think.
Yeah.
So what it actually kind of points out, what I was actually going to say was that watch.
And that's all we've got time for.
I was just going to say, watch the same arguments being made about that were made about Pepe, about Havertz, that Ben White cost 50 million. Let's say he comes in for 50 million. Xhaka's gone, Mesut Ozil's gone, David Luiz is gone. Just watch. That's all I'm going to say.
Just watch. Oh, we waited so long for that, John.
Just watch the arguments that are going to come out when the first time that he concedes an error leading to a goal.
The 50 million price tag only matters if he fails. At the end of the day, that's all that matters.
So true. It genuinely is. Like, we put a monetary value next to everything, especially because it's Arsenal. It's ironic because we've moaned for years about Arsenal not spending, and now we're spending too much. Stop spending, guys.
You can't win. I think that's probably all our combined frustrations when we get annoyed. It's the fact that no matter what argument you can present or what angle you take, you can't win. Anything that happens is a negative somehow, some way.
But would you say that this is a positive, maybe, Drew, as well? Is that the fact that, like, going into this transfer window, I think centre back was one of the positions probably quite far down the pecking order of what's priority for Arsenal in this transfer window. And the fact that they're going and spending 50 million on that position, would that give you encouragement to what to expect in midfield?
You hope, but it's Arsenal. That's the problem. That's the problem here. It is because like yes, that sounds great because it's like wow, we have 50 million for a center back. Like clearly we're going to go big in the midfield and we're going to get a back, and then we're kind of saying like, wait, look at this backup winger that we're getting or the backup left back. This is or you know, yeah, Tavares, and is that how you say it? Tavares? I'm not saying that. And this never happened. So no, but and you're looking at that, you're going, well, this doesn't seem very good, and we're getting linked to all these players, and like clearly one of our good midfield options went really early on, and it just doesn't. It seems like we're just going to drop the ball on it. If history tells us anything, we're going to drop the ball, and that's the fear that a lot of people have, and I would be lying if I said I didn't have that as well. Especially, it's like, yes, Ben White would be great, and I think that he's actually going to fit the kind of style that we want to play really well. But it's only great if that's not the only signing we make.
Yeah, I think John hits the nail on the head there, and I can't disagree with that. If you ask me that question, and we're in September, and our only key signing was Ben White, I'd probably throw myself out this window right here. Like, consider, like, literally, because I can't even imagine, and justly so, I think we'd all be really frustrated, and everyone in the chat and the whole fan base would rightly be frustrated with the fact that we spent $50 million on what none of us thought to be our real need. Everyone went to summer knowing we need a center mid. We probably need 2 center mids, considering, you know, Willock might still leave. You know, Guendouzi's out the door now. Maitland-Niles is probably leaving and isn't really a midfielder in the first place. So, like, all these things that we've already discussed on multiple pods and you've seen on multiple blogs and wherever else. But so yeah, I think that if we get White and then we go out and spend, I don't know, another 40 or 50 million pounds on a midfielder, then you can say that's good. The club's done well. But if it's just White, then
and a keeper. We have one keeper now.
Yeah, we joked about that. We had one keeper even with Renison anyway. So
yeah, but
very true.
Yeah, but now we really don't, because now if Leno was to get injured, God forbid.
This is important. Whatever. It is an important point. If Arsenal, the thing is that whilst I'm sitting there and saying, like, I'm happy for Arsenal to go out and spend 50 million on White, however, if you play me the caveat and say 50 million pound on White means Arsenal don't spend 50 million pound on the midfield, obviously I'm backtracking. I'm saying I'd rather we spend 50 million on the midfield 100%. That's not the argument I'm coming for. And we won't really know until the end of the season to have a legitimate conclusion about the signing of White and whether or not it was the right choice of where we allocated our funds this summer. We're just purely talking about it as a closed off scenario and assessing White as an individual independently of any other kind of factors right now. And that's also, and as Drew said earlier, talking about stats, it is all about context. That is what's most important. Anyway, we move on to the last half an hour of the show, which is, of course, the final part where you guys in the chat box get to be the stars of the show and ask your questions. Throw them into the chat box and we'll try and get through them as many as possible. There are quite a few of. There's over 600 of you watching currently, so please do drop a like on the video if you are enjoying the show, and even if you're not, and if you disagreed with us, because the whole point is about opinions. So please do. Early predictions, Drew, says Dan Robert, for the season. Top scorer, assister for this season for Arsenal. What's your prediction for the season,
man,
Drew?
I have no idea. It's really hard because for all I know, we could sell Oba and Lacazette in the next month, and then where are we? So I'm not quite sure, but I think I think player. I genuinely think player of the season is going to go to Saka. I think for in the context.
Oh, sorry.
No, Christ, I hate you sometimes. No, I think you can see how he's taken to the England camp. How everyone there has said nothing but glowing things about how he's immediately bedded in, and I think us as Arsenal fans already know that he's had that impact with us, and I think he's only going to go from strength to strength now. He's boasted by the confidence of his appearances for England, especially if England go on to win Euro 2020. He played a large part in that in certain stages. So I think he could go on to actually being one of the if not the key, one of the key players we should be building around over the next however long. So player season I'm going to give to Saka. Top scorer, I don't have a clue. If our squad was opening day as it is now, I would probably still say Lacazette, just because tactically he suits Arteta just a little bit better than Aubameyang. No, I think Pepe will be up there. Especially, I would expect him that he would be starting, given he's found a new life on the left with Slack on the right. So I still go with Lacazette. I think he was only iffy last season. He still had 14 goals in Premier League last year. So maybe with that, top assister, maybe Smith Rowe if he's a starter. You don't know. We don't even know if we're going to be getting a 10 or not. So another question, I have no idea. Like, the answer could change because we could go out and get, a creative midfielder within the next month and a half. So I don't know, but yeah, I'd probably go with Smith Rowe with that. So those would be my three answers.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, it's a really difficult question, not knowing all of what's going to happen for the rest of the season, of course. Czech Perk has asked a question. Johnny says, not many links towards number 9s. Are you confident about our options up top?
It's so weird, right? Because like we've been focusing so much on the midfield and the back line. Like what's going on up front? Is it going to be Lacazette? Is it going to be, is Saka going to be a not? Like we don't even know what the attack's going to look like, which is so frustrating because the whole point of last season was, listen, the defense, we got it. We sorted it. Now let's work on this midfield and this attack and start creating more and stuff like that. And I don't know what we've done. Actually, let me say that again. I know that we've done absolutely nothing to fix that. So either that it needs to be a different game plan going forward, or they need to bring someone in that's going to fit some kind of style of play that's going to allow us to create more chances and get at the end of more balls. Because I agree. I don't think there's a lot of talk about number 9s, and I'm not confident about our options up top. I know that Lacazette is a solid player. Aubameyang is a solid player. He had a bad season. We're seeing these videos of him training and stuff, but who knows? Who knows what that's going to, if Aubameyang plays like he did last season, we're going to have a lot of trouble scoring goals. And if Lacazette, barely gets a sniff at the starting lineup again, then we're going to have a lot of problems scoring goals as well. And it looks like Eddie might be on his way out. So like I don't know what's going on with the front there. And that's one of the frustrating things about spending $50 million on a center back. But at the end of the day, like I said, if we
haven't done much of that about center backs, we should talk about that.
If we check all the boxes that we need to, I think it has to include either a game plan for our forwards or a new forward coming in, because I am not confident about our options up front. Pepe is going to be great, by the way. I agree with that. Yeah, I think Pepe is going to have a good season.
I really am looking forward to watching Pepe this season, and I hope he's a consistent starter. That's the main thing for me, is we just got to hope he's a consistent starter. Matt G in the chat, thank you for the super chat. It says, I'm boycotting Spotify until Daniel Ek buys the club, but I miss my Taylor Swift playlist. Tom, can you and the boys tell us their favourite Taylor Swift song and sing some of it, please? I mean, Matt, I really appreciate the donation, but I'm really sorry. You're going to have to shake it off. Cott says, how about old centre-back with experience like Bonucci, says Cott. Owen, I mean, there's obviously Ramos is available. We've been linked to Ramos. How do you feel about bringing in an experienced centre-back this summer?
It's one of those sort of catch-22 things in it, because I think with the current crop of players that we have, that would be maybe the right move. But then again, it reverts back to the thing of we talked earlier about our squad being too young and how many youngsters can you fit in, but yet we go to sign anybody over the age of 20, 26, 27, and people are saying we're signing old players again. There's no sell-on value. So it's a really, really difficult one to get right. My automatic sort of response would be no. I don't think that we should. I think that Mikel Arteta's project has been sold to us as a rebuild and a cultural rebuild, and for me to keep his sort of stamp on that, and for him to continue on in that path, we need to be signing sort of young up and comers.
I agree with you. I think it's certainly an area of the field that we need to be focusing on bringing in younger profiles, just that we have that sell-on value as a main one. Let's go for Sai, Drew, who says, why would I still feel insecure even if we sign up to £200 million worth of players? Please explain.
I think John's already touched on it. It's because the track record has been very spotty. It's some of the deals have been superb, some of the deals have been absolute brain farts. So I think that's the reason. It's not about, I hate the cliche term, but it's not about how much you spend. It's if you spent it correctly. And you can spend £200 million and it'd be absolutely awful. You can also spend £100 million and it can be absolutely brilliant. So I think it's just like that kind of that first reaction, gut instinct, nervousness that a lot of our fans have, because things haven't gone particularly well across the board in transfers for the last couple of seasons. So maybe that's why. First, I mean, I'd love it if we spent £200 million on this summer, but it's just, you got to hope that we did it right. So yeah, that would be my take.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Ranpur says, I mean, it's a question on Pepe. We were talking about it. Ranpur says, will Pepe be able to continue, you think, his good form into next season, John?
He will, because he's going to play for Arsenal and probably play at some point in the season. So he will be able to continue his good form. I don't know. I mean, I hope so. I think
We've been doing this podcast for 6 years. That is the worst answer to a question I have ever.
Thank you.
Oh my
Thank
God.
you. No, look.
Oh.
To answer your question, yeah, I think we're going to see a good, and that's why I was mentioning a little bit earlier. So I think that Pepe is going to have a good season, and I think that it's hard to say only because I don't know what the midfield is going to look like, only because I don't know exactly how he's going to want to set up. I guess Bellerin is going to be our right back. So when I'm thinking of Pepe up on that right hand side,
Do you think he's going to be our right back?
I
Do you think Bellerin's going to be here?
I think so. I think so. I would be. I do. Is it because have we seen anything like any kind of indication?
Yeah, I think he's gone.
Do you really? Okay. All
yeah,
right, maybe.
I really genuinely think he's gone.
So who are we getting in the right back then?
I will bet you £10 here now. Bellerin is gone by the end of this summer window.
Drew, what do you think?
I don't think we're gonna. I think you're gonna see Callum Chambers as our starting right back on match day one. Don't be. Right. I would not be surprised if he actually.
Maybe it's wishful thinking that I don't know if I want to see Callum Chambers starting at right back. If we're losing Bellerin, I would like to see something better. Anyway, questions about Pepe. Point is, yes, I think Pepe is gonna have a good season. This is why we're an hour into it. Okay, I think it's going to be a good season. I think it's going to be a good season for him. Yes, he will be.
Cool, we got it. Dear me. Wesley says, for everyone except me, it's nice of him. I can't find the question now. It's disappeared off the screen. Says, for everyone except Tom, your realistic choice for Granit Xhaka. Owen, we'll start with you.
Bissouma. I am on the hype train, man. It is, and it's one that I really just don't. Man, I really, really, really don't understand what this club think at times. Because I mean, you talk about taking the low hanging fruit. The guy's running about wearing Arsenal kits and Arsenal merchandise. He's basically crying to be bought. The price tag is assumed to be in around the region of 30 million, which is an absolute steal for a player of his quality, his profile, his age. It's just I don't understand what the club are thinking when they're looking. Not that I don't like some of the other targets, but in terms of what you're getting for what you're paying, the Bissouma package deal is the most attractive for me, and hopefully they see sense.
Oh, God, we missed out on John Lundstrom going to Rangers. Drew?
So typical Drew overanalyzes this question by like a factor of 10. So it's hard for me to answer because I don't know. Just listen. Shut your mouth. I don't know if we're going to be doing like 4-3-3 next season or 4-2-3-1. So,
Drew,
you know what I mean?
Who's your choice? Who's your Xhaka replacement?
That's the worst answer we've heard on this podcast.
We've been doing this podcast for 6 years.
If I had to answer for the sake of keeping things to what we know has worked, I would go with Koopmeiners. Unlike most people have actually watched Koopmeiners a considerable amount.
Has he gone to Atalanta? I thought he'd gone.
I don't think he's gone. I think he might be going, and he should be going to a bigger club than AZ, and I think he will this summer. So that's why I think we should go and get him now. For like, he's just like Xhaka, but a little bit better for me. Smarter on the ball, a little bit better pace. You know, he's in the Dutch camp, so he's and he's got leadership. He's already AZ's captain. I think he's 22 or 23 years old. So that would be my choice. I know it wouldn't be as popular as Bissouma. I would rate Bissouma if we got him, obviously. And I just think that because we might be spending £50 million on Ben White, we can't go out. You might have to get a good midfielder for a little bit of a cheaper price point. So that would be my choice.
John,
I'm right there with Drew, and it's interesting because I actually didn't really know much about the player the last time we were on a podcast, and this similar question was asked. Drew had the same answer, and I was like, "Oh, well, let me look into this guy." And he is definitely that kind of like for like. If we're looking for that type of player, with respect to kind of how he's going to progress the ball in the way that Arteta wants to. So I'm right there with Drew. My only caveat is that we're going to need another signing in midfield to cover. For there's even a caveat. There's a caveat to that caveat as well. Yes, and I think Lukonga is going to be it. The caveat to my caveat is that we are not going to be in Europe.
Podcast.
Wait, hold on. Let me just say it's going to make sense if you let me talk. So initially, I'm thinking you're looking at a player like Xhaka. He's always available, fit, meaning he's always available for selection. He's very seldom injured, almost never injured. So you know that you're going to be able to rely on that player. pretty much week in, week out for almost every tournament. And not only that, he plays 90 minutes for every time he's on the pitch, essentially. So not only are you know that you're going to have a player that's there. So the alternative is going to be if he gets injured, which is probably going to, whoever we get there is going to be injured more than Xhaka was. We're going to likely rely more on a backup. In that case, it was like El Neni or Lukonga if we make the signing. So that's fine. The caveat to my caveat was that we're not in Europe anymore. So we're only really focused on the cup competition and the domestic cup and on the league. So there's a significantly less amount of games that we need to play. So I don't think it's as important to sign a super technical great backup to whoever we sign for Xhaka. That's why I'm still going to go with the same signing. I think a Bissouma signing would be amazing. That's like the ideal, I think. But if we're wanting to play a similar way and Arteta wants to play that way, I think that would be the best.
Fair enough. I mean, I'd choose Locatelli all day long. So that's my choice. There's no caveats. There's just an answer. So there you go. RG, Owen says, Owen, the question from RG who says, do you guys think that presence of fellow Arteta outcast Guendouzi being at Marseille would nudge Saliba away from Arsenal permanently if he goes there? Guendouzi, the Grinch. I mean, can you imagine Guendouzi in a Christmas film? That'd be great.
Man, I'm telling you, I don't know what it is about that French core group of youngsters there, man. No, man, it's no, but like look at Guendouzi, Rabiot, Mbappe. I think his temperament at the Euros was absolutely awful. But do you want to know what?
I think family members in the crowd.
I did, yeah. There was a bit of a domestic. It was like an episode of EastEnders. It was wild. No, look, I think William Saliba, for me, judging by the things that he's said to the press over this past 18 months or so, I think that his agent is probably the worst suspect that we can have as to who could lead William Saliba astray. In terms of Guendouzi, I don't know. It would all depend on how close they are. I suppose you can only speculate as to what their relationship would be, if it's a positive one or a negative one. I'm not too sure. But at the end of the day, I think it comes down to a lot with these guys is finances and game time. And that it will all depend on how the sort of landscape looks when that loan period comes to an end, rather than what's being whispered in his ear. Although in saying that, if there's ever a time to see how the power of whispering in somebody's ear, it's look at Buendia with Emi Martinez, so you never know.
Yeah. I mean, Aston Villa are just irritating. Speaking of which, Drew Karthik says, is there a price for you guys that you would sell Smith Rowe for this summer?
No, absolutely not. Unlike most people, I'm probably not. I'm okay if we sold a young player of promise if the price point was correct. I just don't think I don't think this is the right summer to entertain that. I think if we were in better standing in the league, if we were generally fighting for top four, making a push for the title, and we were constantly bringing in big players in his position, and he wasn't going to get the minutes he wanted, then I would be okay with selling him. Just he can go on and build a career elsewhere. But there's still plenty of scope for him to still be one of those key players we build around moving forward over the coming years, and he's shown that he suits what Arteta needs. So no, I wouldn't sell him at all. I don't think I think the price would be astronomical for me to want to consider. That's just my take. So.
See, this is why I wouldn't do well. This is why I wouldn't do well in business, okay? Because right now, if I was Stan Kroenke, I would just buy Aston Villa and liquidate them for the shit that they have shown. Them absolute bunch of bottom dwellers,
They still finish below us. That's the stupidest part about this whole thing, is that their fans are like on this high horse and like our worst season ever, and we finished above them. So go away.
I wrote a piece about the fact why people should take the Villa bid for Smith Rowe seriously because of the context behind it. But I tell you what, I agree with you, John. I am so sick of Aston Villa fans commenting on my videos. I'm so sick of it.
Where did it come? All of a sudden, Villa is somehow relevant.
I don't know.
It's not like 90 years ago. Like maybe you were relevant 90 years ago, but not.
Oh man, I've got a friend of mine who is from Birmingham and he is an Aston Villa fan. And we watched, because I was at uni when we beat Aston Villa in the FA Cup final. We watched it together. And honestly, I just hearing his Brummie accents is just when Arsenal was scoring those goals was the most. Because I mean, the Brummie accent in general, if you aren't aware, is quite a miserable sounding accent. Like
Drew, if you were an accent, it would be the best.
Jesus Christ! Wow. All right.
Whoa!
Sorry, buddy. I love it. No, I'm sorry. Come back.
That seems like.
True, please. Easy old Ed says, Drew. John, I think is next. I'll give you a cheerier answer. Are fans overrating the impact of the African Cup of Nations on signings? For most players, we are worrying about 2 to 3 games missed on a 5-year deal.
So here's the caveat to the no, just kidding. Are fans overreacting about the AFCON? I think so. I mean, here's the thing. I think that fans are a little upset over just the history of our players going out on loan and getting injured, or not on loan, out on random tournaments and getting injured and things like that. I think that there's a lot of football to be played, and that obviously less now than there was last season, given we're out of Europe. But I don't think it's that big of a deal, especially if they do leave. It gives these younger players a chance to play in the league, whereas we don't have that avenue anymore with Europe. If you look at your players like your Saka and your Emile Smith-Rowe, they were allowed to come into this team because we had Europe and Europa, which was this kind of cauldron for these younger players to show what they had. If it weren't for Europa League and the extra games, in addition to the Premier League, which was our main goal at the time, we wouldn't have seen Saka, we wouldn't have seen Emile Smith-Rowe, and they wouldn't have been able to get consistent time to show us how good they are. So without Europe, I think that there's going to need to be that avenue. And when you have certain attacking players like all the players that are going to be going to that tournament, you're going to have younger players that are now going to be able to step up in their absence to perhaps show what they got. Even if it's only a run of 3 or 5 games, that's all it took for some players.
Yeah, very, very true. Owen, Timothy Lowell says, Tom, on your question about how many young players are playing at top clubs, well, Barcelona have quite a few. Pedri, Araujo, Mignola, Dest, Fati when he played, and others, but not regularly. I think the point is it's about not regularly. I mean, if you look at Fati and Pedri, for instance, they are out on their own as two of the biggest teenage talents in the world right now, as is Bukayo Saka. Do you think that there is scope for teams to play with more than kind of 21 and young year old, or is it a case of it's kind of it depends on how good they are, which sounds silly in my head when I've said it back, but do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think, and I've mentioned before, even when discussing our own players, that I often think that we think of these players as kids for too long. For me, 21, you're not a kid anymore. You should be a fully fledged first team player, and your development should be well established by that stage. I always we look at Frank Lampard, Stevie Gerrard, John Terry, Ryan Giggs, all these players, named countless of them, and they were all absolutely fantastic at that age. So for me, the age thing doesn't matter. But what I will say is, and Barcelona is actually quite a good example of that. And I would argue as well that that's partially possibly the reason that Barcelona have slightly declined over the last number of years. But at the same time, they still have Ter Stegen and Nets. They have Gerard Piqué at the back. They have Sergio Busquets and that little guy Leo up front. So you talk about listen to their names I just rattled off. It would mesmerize you thinking about the fact that they still have a spine that good. So that's a massive difference between us. Is the fact that, and I think the big thing that annoys me with Arsenal, if you want to use that as an example for Arsenal, even our senior players are fragile in temperament. You look at Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, you look at Granit Xhaka. We're starting to crack that with people like Thomas Partey and Kieran Tierney, but it's going to take more than 2 signings to crack that sort of soft underbelly that Arsenal have had for numerous years.
Yeah. So I saw John's face, so I'm going to be brief. But to build on Owen's point, the league also matters as well. Youngsters playing considerable minutes for big clubs in the Premier League, it's different than if you're playing in La Liga, Bundesliga, Liga, where mistakes aren't killed off with the efficiency and the effectiveness they are in the Premier League. The Premier League is a top club in the world. It's got the largest conglomerate of stars, top level players playing in one league. So the expectations for younger players like an Ansu Fati or to have 3 or 4 players that are 18, 19, 20 years old when you start 11 just doesn't happen. It happens in Germany because that's every club in Germany does it. Even sometimes Bayern, Dortmund still do it, etc. You get the same thing in France, Belgium, the Netherlands, whatever. But the Premier League is a little bit of a different animal. So I think if you have 1 or 2, where do you have 1 or 2 young players in R11 really? And then Tierney was bordering on it when he first came in. So I think that's kind of enough. I think there's got to be a finite point where you have to say, we can have a lot of young players in the squad, but to say that we're relying on 4 and 5 young players in the first team 11 is a little bit of a different balance for me. But I agree with you overall, though, that when you're developing players, you'll like by the time a player is 19, 20 years old, if they're first team ready by that age. It's rare when they're ready by 17. 18 years old, 19, 20 years old.
A club like Barca or Arsenal,
exactly.
when they get to 2021 and they're not playing, that's probably tells you the indication they're not going to make it at that level 9 times out of 10. Like, you look at Nelson, you look at Nketiah, have reached that age now, and they're not playing, and that probably gives you the best indication about their future. There are circumstances where you get late bloomers. Of course, you think about like Olivier Giroud was playing at the lower levels of French football.
Jamie Vardy is a prime one that people love to mention.
Yeah, Jamie Vardy.
But that's rare as well. It's just as rare as a 17-year-old breaking through at 17 as it is. So,
Ansu Fati is a real enigma of kind of a talent that comes through, and you don't really get that often. We've got time for one more question each, so we'll do that. We'll go in reverse order. Owen Elliot Roberts says, after the signing of Tavares, Lokonga and White, where do Arsenal go from there?
Oh, somewhere, hopefully.
Great.
Well, look, the only thing
you have
say,
no scope, John, to critique answers.
I just did.
No, look, I think that when you look at those names in particular, you're looking at, although Ben White is involved with the English national team, he's relatively uninvolved. Negotiations, I'm sure, are taking place with him personally as well. But the one thing I would say is that they're all relatively uninvolved with the European Championships. And for me, I think that once the Euros finish and players' holidays are over, that's when we're going to see the club spring into action. So I'd like to hope within the next maybe fortnight to 3 weeks, we will really start to see Arsenal starting to push on and getting some bigger names in. I'm expecting some, not marquee signings, but some more recognisable names and guaranteed first team starters. So I'll start to panic after another 3 or 4 weeks if we're hearing absolutely nothing.
John, Antonio Banks says, do you think our youth recruitment should be better? The depth of talented players at academies at Man City and Chelsea is much higher than that of Arsenal's.
I mean, it's kind of interesting considering when you look at players like Saka and ESR, it's hard to say that our youth recruitment is poor. I guess, I mean, they're pretty much first team starter. We have a player that's starting for England, in a major European in the Euros. So I think is there, we're seeing a lot of players go out on loan and stuff like that, but how many players do you really expect at any team, even those that you mentioned, Man City or Chelsea, that make the breakthrough, like players like Emile Smith-Rowe and Saka did? What they've done is very, very rare and very important to how we're planning the entire rebuild of this club going forward. We're throwing around numbers like 70 million for ESR. Who knows what Saka's worth in this market right now? Probably over 100 million. So should it be better? I think it just needs to be as consistent as it has been. If we can uncover a player like Saka or ESR every 3-5 years, I mean, that would be pretty damn good. So hopefully it keeps up the way it is, because I think that there's been some very, very good talents coming through there.
I think people look at where the youth side finish in the table and assume that our academy is in kind of a really bad situation. I'm not saying that it isn't in the best state, but the thing is you look at how many of our first who would actually get into that academy side are either in the Arsenal first team or off on loan last season. That it's bare bones, like the academy, in terms of the players that are there.
Sorry, and people in the chat are pointing out that we're talking about player recruitment, but we're also talking about depth of talent and player lacking in Arsenal's academy. And I don't necessarily agree that that's the case. I'll put it this way: assuming that it is true that Arsenal's academy is lacking talent, which I'm not necessarily conceding to because I don't think it is. then I think we should be looking not in Premier League, in the Premier League. I think we should be looking at youth players all over Europe,
which you
not
can't
just
do
Premier.
anymore.
Right, and you can't even do that. So really, what are you stuck with? You're stuck
Exactly.
with.
I think people are missing this as well. Like a lot of what's happened recently is that in the last couple of years before Brexit and the situation with that is that teams like Man United, Chelsea, City went out and pillaged a lot of continental talent at that age because they knew at the start of 2021 that would become banned. You can't now sign players from the continent from the ages of 16 to 18, and that's why a lot of players. We did it as well. We brought in the likes of Joel Idaho from Ajax. We brought in Omar Rekic from Hertha Berlin.
Serjan as well.
Yes, of course. And I mean, we brought in Nikolai Moller, the Swedish striker. So we did a few of those to try and basically beat that. And then Salah Eddin, I think his name is from Final, that came in too. So we went out and did some of that. But it is about more the fact that we have produced some really good young players. And we are still going out and signing some decent young players. Martinelli is a very good example of that. It's just a simple case of the fact that, unfortunately, for the youth side, is that a lot of the players, when they get to a certain age, spend time away on loan or are already good enough to be playing in the first team. So I wouldn't necessarily correlate how bad the youth team is doing in the PL2 with how bad their production of youth talent actually is, because it doesn't always correlate.
It's not just that. Oh my God, I'm gonna spare everybody a rant. But youth football at that level is not about winning the youth league. It's about developing the players. The results are secondary. It's about how well I'm producing the players and if they're coming on, if they fit whatever tactical and technical culture we're building at the club. It's not about if we win the youth league every season. That's secondary, and that for me, I think it's, that's just, you're looking at things just the wrong way.
Right, and which is why if you look at the start when I answered this question, I said I'm looking at the players that have succeeded from those youth academies. That's the biggest test. Is your academy working? Are you getting successful young players, coming into the first team of their squad, or doing good things? And clearly we have. So
look how many.
We're getting multiple. So Saka, the CSR, they want to have Aziz in and around the camp this season. There's a lot of buzz around.
Literally saying this, yeah.
There's a lot of buzz around Patino as well. There's buzz around Serjan as well. Nikolai Muller's highly thought of. There's five or six players that we've just rattled off of that might have scope to get Premier League minutes with the first team over the next year or two, and they've all come from the academy. It doesn't matter if the academy hasn't won the youth leagues.
Look what Joe Willock just did on loan. I mean, you could say whether he's the kind of player you're talking about, but this is a player that came through the academy and is basically saved Newcastle from relegation. So I think that's pretty damn good, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't think there's really anything wrong with our youth production at the moment, to be honest. I think it's an area that we need to be critiquing. I mean, we've gone full circle with the pod. We started off the show talking about, do we have enough kids, and is it justifiable playing enough kids in the first team? And now we're talking about, is the academy good enough? Anyway, we've run out of time, unfortunately, to go for any more of your questions. Thank ever so much, guys, for tuning in this evening. It's been a fantastic show and a lot of really good insight from my panel of experts that you've had this evening with their caveats and everything. It's been fantastic. But before we go, last thing I need to say is that Mike from the Gooners podcast, of which Owen is, of course, from that parish also, is doing a fantastic thing this summer. Yeah, there you go. Is doing a fantastic thing this summer for a cause called Gooners versus Cancer. You may or may not have already heard of it. I'm sure plenty of you have already. It was a fantastic cause that went really well last year and the year before that, and however long it's been established for now. But this summer, one of the ways they're raising money is they're doing something that I know a lot of you would be interested in. They're doing a FIFA tournament. You can donate $25, I think it is, to enter, and then you can play on either Xbox or PlayStation. So if you like your FIFA, if you like showing how good you are at something, this means nothing in the real life of tangible experience, then you can do that and donate some money to a fantastic cause as well, and help some people who really do genuinely need it. So the link to both of the Xbox and the PS5, did I say PS4 earlier on? PS5 tournament are in the description. So please make sure you do click the links, check it out. And if you don't even want to play and you still want to donate to Gooners versus Cancer, all of the stuff is still there as well. So please make sure you do. Speaking of which, Owen, thank you ever so much for coming on, mate. Always appreciate your time.
No, it's a pleasure. It's been too long, and I'm glad we got through that. It was a bit laboursome with John's negativity, but we got there in the end.
Apparently, I'm on the verge of a stroke, according to someone on the chat.
Yeah,
so-
You know
somebody
what I find
earlier.
is really funny is when people say that we look miserable. It's like they expect us to sit here smiling our faces off when someone else is talking. It's
Well,
like
I
Drew's
can
chatting
tell
away.
you-
I'm sitting there like.
I can tell you, as somebody that watches often from the opposite side of the screen, I'm normally in a pair of boxer shorts on my bed with sweets or crisps lying on top of me, double chin, and so I can guarantee you the critics don't look any better. Yeah, but there was a brilliant comment earlier about yourself, John, in the chat, saying that you need to meditate. There, like,
Well, I'll tell you. I just got this like Nespresso maker, so I've been literally drinking espresso all for
Other coffee
probably
makers are available.
yeah. Well, that's the one I've been on, and it's not an official one of this podcast yet. So that I'm not getting paid to say this, but so that could be why I look like I'm having a stroke. Maybe I guess.
There's so many espressos. Thank you, John. Anyway, for your time, mate. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. No problem.
And is the Miami podcast coming back this season, or
I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if I'm. Probably not.
I just missed the intro music. I mean, I have to buy it off you. I have to buy the rights.
There you go.
Drew, thank you ever so much for coming on, mate. Pleasure to have you on once again.
Of course, it's good to see the guys again. We should probably do this a little bit more often than once every half decade. So,
I mean, since we all stopped writing on the site because we all got jobs, lives.
But yeah, no, and thanks for the chat as usual. I know they take the piss out of us too, but it's always good to have them on. And like I keep trying to say, their support's like phenomenal. How they've helped you grow the channel, and the things that they donate. It's been great. So thank you guys for the chat. Thanks for hanging out with us as well as always. So.
Yeah, definitely so. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. It's been fantastic. We've had easily over 1,000 of you individually in here this evening watching us talk some absolute rubbish at times and entertain your evening. If you prefer not to look at our ugly faces, you can listen to this show on audio-only platforms as well. It is available on Spotify and SoundCloud and iTunes. It'll be uploaded about an hour or so after it goes live, so please make sure you do. I'll be back tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. For the Transfer Show. Episode 64, Zoo Lane, is going to be on tomorrow morning, so I look forward to giving you guys that content as always. Yes, we love these early morning get-ups. It's fantastic. We'll see you again very, very soon, guys. An absolute pleasure. And as always, up the Arsenal.